tending to bring a sense of order to the chaos that Edgar had cultivated. Upon his arrival at the building, the air felt thick with anticipation. Mrs. Milligan pointed the way, her voice tight with exasperation as she mentioned that the doorbell was disconnected. The doctor descended into the basement, a dark, dusty realm where the roots of the building felt most exposed. Before making his way to the apartment door, he did not meet the man he expected. Instead of a disheveled hermit, he found a man whose eyes held a spark of intense, singular purpose. Edgar Witherspoon did not care for social niceties or the standard expectations of polite society. He was in the middle of a task, a hunt for a specific doll head. The conversation between the two men was a collision of worlds. Sinclair tried to steer the discussion toward the welfare of the tenant, while Edgar seemed only concerned with the immediate, urgent requirements of his work. The doctor was told, in no uncertain terms, that he was trespassing on a process that kept the world from falling into chaos. As the days turned into weeks, the relationship between the psychiatrist and his patient evolved in ways that neither could have anticipated. Sinclair visited often, his initial goal of institutionalization slowly dissolving into a genuine, if bewildered, curiosity. He witnessed Edgar working on a contraption, a sculpture of disparate parts that hummed with a life of its own. It was a chaotic accumulation of trinkets, yet within that chaos, there was a strange, undeniable harmony. Edgar spoke of a voice that guided him, a voice that provided instructions on what was needed to keep the balance. The doctor found himself questioning his own reality. Was Edgar truly insane? Or was he attuned to a frequency that remained silent to the rest of the world? Edgar would speak of islands in the Pacific, of distant weather patterns and the subtle, minute adjustments required to maintain global stability. He spoke of his past as an engineer, a life of success and money that he had abandoned for this higher, albeit quieter, calling. He shared his prune with the doctor, offering it as a gesture of hospitality that bridged the gap between their differing perceptions of truth. The turning point came when the news reports began to mirror the warnings Edgar had whispered. When a small island in the South Pacific vanished beneath the waves, Sinclair was shaken to his core. The coincidences were too precise, the timing too uncanny. He had mocked the idea that a collection of junk could save the world, yet the evidence suggested that Edgar held a secret that reached far beyond the four corners of his apartment. The fear that Mrs. Milligan had felt for the building was eclipsed by a burgeoning, terrifying wonder. The climax of their association arrived with the realization that Edgar was ready to move on. He had been offered a retirement in Miami, a chance to bask in the sun and let someone else carry the weight of the world. The transition was not one of grand ceremony, but of quiet resignation. Sinclair found himself standing before the machine, looking at it with the eyes of a convert. He saw not a pile of garbage, but a delicate, vital instrument that required the same meticulous care Edgar had provided for 11 years. When Edgar departed, the room felt emptier, yet more significant than it ever had. Sinclair was left behind, not as a doctor treating a patient, but as an apprentice inheriting a legacy. He looked at the machine, the ping-pong ball he needed to place, the intricate adjustments that had to be made by 7:13 in the evening. He realized that the practice of medicine, in its truest sense, was not just about treating the individual, but about caring for the well-being of the entire planet. The story of Edgar Witherspoon became a lesson in perspective. It taught Dr. Sinclair that there is a difference between a sane man hearing a crazy voice and a crazy man hearing a sane voice. Sometimes the truth resides in the middle, in the quiet, dusty corners of the world where people look for doll heads and paper clips, unaware that their small, irrational acts are the very things that keep the universe spinning in its proper orbit. As the doctor took up his new responsibility, he felt a sense of purpose that he had never known before. He began to learn the precise, delicate art of adjustments. He realized that he was now the guardian of the balance, the silent protector who operated in the shadows of the mundane. And though he had once been a man of pure, cold science, he was now a man of faith, believing in the unseen forces that held the world together. The apartment building continued its daily routine. The neighbors complained as they always had, and the world outside spun on its axis, unaware of the quiet, heroic work being done behind a closed door. Dr. Jeremy Sinclair found himself happy, for he had discovered that the most important work is often the kind that no one else can see. He looked forward to the challenges, to the voice that might one day speak to him, and to the endless, beautiful rhythm of keeping the world from going poof. He had become part of something far greater than himself, a story that was etched into the very fabric of existence, a tale found only in the quiet, transformative corners of the world. He understood now that his clinical training had only been the beginning. Real medicine required an open mind, a willingness to listen to the whispers of the universe, and the patience to find the one thing, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, that would restore the equilibrium. He had been transformed, and in turn, he would dedicate his life to the well-being of all, one adjustment at a time. The legacy of Edgar Witherspoon lived on, carried forward by a man who had finally learned to look beyond the surface, to the deep, resonant truth that everything, no matter how small, has its place and its purpose in the grand, magnificent design of life. The doctor often thought of Edgar, wondering if he was enjoying the Miami sun, listening for the voice that had directed his path for so long. He imagined him sitting on a beach, perhaps collecting seashells, his pockets once again filled with the treasures of the earth. It was a comforting image, one that reminded Sinclair that there was joy to be found in the service of the world, even if that service was misunderstood by the masses. He became a collector of sorts himself. He found beauty in the discarded, meaning in the mundane, and purpose in the overlooked. He started to see the world not as a series of disconnected events, but as a deeply integrated system that responded to the kindness and attention of those who cared enough to look closely. The stress of his previous life melted away, replaced by a calm, steady resolve to do what was necessary, when it was necessary, with the precision that the world demanded. Years passed, and the apartment building grew older, but it remained a sanctuary of sorts. Sinclair often wondered who would eventually take over from him, when the time came for his own retirement. He hoped, perhaps, that the process would be as natural and as gentle as it had been for him. He imagined a young person, perhaps a student of science, who was also starting to feel the weight of the world, someone who needed a purpose, someone who was ready to hear the voice. He remained vigilant, a sentinel of the ordinary. He knew that the world was still a place of noise and bother, of storms and volcanoes, and the endless, tiring churn of conflict. But he also knew that there was a balance to be maintained, a stability that could be achieved through the dedication of one person who cared. It was a humble, quiet, and profoundly noble path. In his moments of reflection, Sinclair would often look at the machine, now humming with a familiarity that felt like a heartbeat. He saw the years of history in its parts, the remnants of the lives that had come before, and the promise of the lives that would come after. It was more than a sculpture, it was a testament to the idea that no one is truly unimportant, that every action, no matter how small, has a consequence, and that the world is a delicate, precious thing that requires our collective and individual protection. The doctor found that his own life had become a mirror of the machine. He had found his balance, his place in the grand design, and his peace of mind. He was no longer a stranger to himself, no longer a man divided between logic and faith. He was whole, a guardian of the balance, and a believer in the power of the small, the quiet, and the kind. He remembered the advice